Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thank you guys for joining me. Happy to be back. Happy Sunday. This is going to be the astro weather for the week of February the 8th through the 15th, 2026. And today we are talking all things Saturn entering back into the sign of Aries. A few quick love notes before we get on to the video. Please do like and subscribe. Click that bell button below if you want to see more of my videos. I'm here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Do give me a thumbs up if you guys like this video. Consider sharing on your socials. And while you're there, follow me on X at BTV Astro for more of my astro ramblings. And make sure you come and hang out this Friday. We're going to be live on the channel and we're going to be doing solar eclipse astrology readings. It's going to be exciting. These are always lots of fun. So if you want to know what the solar eclipse in Aquarius is bringing you this month, come and stop by and hang out on Friday evening. We'll be here at 6 o'clock p.m. Central. That's 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. All right, well guys, this is the turning point. Okay, so the next 2-3 weeks, things are going to get rather fiery and feisty. This week is all about bold breakthroughs and obviously kind of stepping into our power with purpose. Now, Saturn is making its return into the sign of Aries this week. It is leaving the dreamy sign of Pisces and it's moving into fiery Aries. And this will be happening just in time for Valentine's Day on February 13th, 2026. This means that we are closing a chapter of kind of emotional lessons, and now we are diving head first into a new era of disciplined action and obviously self-mastery, as we know that Saturn is the Lord of Karma. Now, it's kind of like the universe is handing us a torch, and we need to use that torch to kind of light our path forward, and we need to do this without hesitation. So this week we're going to see the moon that's actually going to be moving at the beginning of the week on Sunday through intense Scorpio. Lots of deep emotional dives and transformation is expected with that. We'll also see the last quarter moon square, which is that breakdown period as we are heading into the solar eclipse next week. We'll then see the moon move through Sagittarius, which is going to be expansive for ideas and obviously for adventure. And then we'll see some shifts where the moon is going into Capricorn, which is great for getting some work done. It's also going to be really highlighting Saturn at 29 degrees before we see this ingress. And it's all about practical ambition and structure. I think that it's really encouraging us this week with the preparation for the solar eclipse, this really big ingress that we're feeling. It's just time to release old baggage, and it's time to kind of dream big and build something that's going to be long lasting. But many of us feel like we're starting from like the zero entry point. So if that's how you guys are feeling, that's okay. That's how we're supposed to feel. I do think that if we embrace some of the changes with courage with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, this can be an opportunity for many of us to kind of rise up, be stronger, more focused, more so dedicated, and be unapologetically ourselves. So remind yourself this week that you've got it. It's all about kind of turning and transforming some of these challenges into what can be triumphs. Now we're going to talk all about Saturn and Aries. I'm going to talk to you guys about what this means, give you the full rundown, but also as a reminder, I cover this in a lot of my other videos, and that part of that's because we saw Saturn and Neptune that were in Aries last year. But in a nutshell, 2025 was the dress rehearsal and the preparation for what's about to begin now. So some of you guys may have deja vu. Others feel like it was kind of like a false start. Now you're really ready to kind of get the show on the road. I'll take you through the 12 rising signs and we'll also talk about what this means for Saturn's ingress and how to prepare. And if you guys haven't checked out my Saturn and Aries webinar, please do check it out. I'll put it somewhere in the comments below so you guys can take a look at it. It is jam-packed with lots of information, especially if you've got personal planets in Aries. If you're having your first or even your second Saturn return, it's really helpful. And I've got some to-do lists for Saturn through the 12 rising signs in that, in that webinar. So it's really helpful if you guys are needing a little bit of a pep talk. Click the links below, head over to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. All right, so let's get right into it. I almost said let's dump into it. It's going to feel like a little bit of a dumpster fire, to be honest with you guys, right when this gets started. And a lot of that is because as you guys are watching this now, Neptune is sitting at 0 degrees of Aries. I posted about this recently on my Twitter where I was talking about how this in-between phase before Saturn moves back into Aries, that we're kind of at the edge of unknowing, not knowing how to get started. So once we see Saturn make this ingress, we're going to see it sit at that 0-degree point, and it's going to be about initiating something new. So everything that's going to be happening this week, both in our own lives, but also out in the world, is going to be very significant. And obviously it's kind of like the prelude to the solar eclipse. But the dates of this transit, so we're going to see Saturn return back into Aries. That's going to be happening on February 13th, 2026. And Aries is obviously a fire cardinal sign, so it's going to be dealing with action, motivation, and passion. And like I said, last year we got a little bit of a sneak peek, but this time Saturn is going to be staying in Aries for quite some time. So it's actually going to be remaining in Aries until about April of 2028. A Saturn cycle is usually around 2 years and change, and then we see some retrogrades that are kind of in between before we see the full ingress. So it's safe to say we've got 2 years of Saturn kind of being in this sign and initiating something new. Now, Saturn won't retrograde in Aries until closer to the end of July of this year, around the 26th of July, 2026. And it'll stay retrograde until it goes direct on December 10th, 2026. So we've got quite the stretch of seeing Saturn kind of do its thing over the next couple of months. But if I were you, I would refer back to what happened the last time Saturn was in Aries. Think about what was happening in 2025, specifically the end of May all the way through the beginning of September. That was that kind of brief preview before it retrograded back into Pisces. Now, for who this is going to be impacting the most, obviously, if you have anything 0 to about 15 degrees of Aries, sun, moon, rising, or if you have a personal planet there, you're going to be under a Saturn conjunction throughout this year. And if you're 0 to about 5 degrees of Aries, you're going to be also under a Saturn transit with Neptune. So it's going to be doubly important for the early decans. But it'll also be impacting my Capricorns and my Aquarius risings, because you guys are ruled by Saturn. So you're going to be feeling the effects of the kind of ingress and then the next week Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And that's because Saturn rules these signs. So it's going to amplify the themes of your personal responsibility in your chart. So definitely take a look at your chart, see where Aries is, see if you have any planets at the first, I would say really 5 to about 10, maybe 15 degrees. That's where Saturn's going to be moving through all this year. Now, also, if you have anything 0 to 5 degrees of the cardinal signs, okay, so I'm talking to obviously my Cancers, my Libras, my Capricorns, you guys are going to be feeling the effects of an opposition or a square with Saturn. So it's important to really take a look and see if you've got any planets there. Like I said, I'll take you guys through the rising signs and we'll talk about what that means. But a little bit more challenging for you guys because now Saturn is coming into an angular portion of your chart, and life is going to get a little bit more serious. Now, Saturn in mundane astrology represents things like government, right? Top-down structures, authority figures. It's connected to economies, institutions, and Saturn is known for creating boundaries and borders. So he will show us restrictions or limitation, and it's very much tied to societal structures as well. So it brings up the themes of accountability. It's very common to see Saturn transits kind of align with major reforms or changes that are going on to power systems. While Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, cardinal fire, traditionally ruled by Mars, is known for striking the match, right? They want to be first, they want to get there fast. It's all about taking initiative, and because they're ruled by Mars, it's a sign that deals with bravery. It's connected to courage, independence, action, self-identity, leadership, and raw primal energy. So it's that spark that starts the fire. Now, with Saturn going into Aries, the themes that we have seen so far, and they're going to continue to really ramp up over the next couple of weeks, really is this transit where it's really calling us to blend, I think, Saturn's kind of discipline with Aries' more bold drive. So what it wants to do is it wants to urge all of us to build long-lasting foundations, but we're no longer hanging out in Pisces land. We got to get out of bed. We got to get into action. We have to be here now. It's a very impatient sign. The challenge is that it's going to be teaching us how to kind of temper some of the flame, some of the ego, and some of the actions, think things through and see clearly. It wants to teach us to really mature when it comes to our impulses. And it's also about setting boundaries around our independence, maybe working hard to kind of claim our personal power. I think many of us are going to really be seeing that there's going to be some tests when it comes to leadership and self-reliance, learning to become self-sufficient, picking ourselves up by the bootstraps, learning to do things ourselves are all good things while Saturn is in Aries. Because what will happen with this transit is Saturn will actually end up kind of rewarding whoever is able to move through this and have a sense of unbreakable confidence and vision. So it's really all about real world achievements and kind of bringing this into a reality. Now, it's going to be entering into 0 degrees. Okay, so 0 degrees in degree astrology is very potent because it is the rawest kind of form of that particular energy. It's still young, it's still yet to be developed. So as if 0 degrees wasn't enough, it's going to be 0 degrees of Aries. So it can be a very potent degree because we know that this is one of the 4 cardinal points that we see in astrology, which means we can see some really big world events happen when planets are sitting at this degree. So it represents this undiluted energy. Okay, so yes, it's a fresh start, kind of like hitting reset. And because it's a critical degree, it's full of potential and it's all about kind of this initiatory power. But it can feel raw, it can feel untested. I keep using the phrase, we're kind of in uncharted territory. We're not entirely sure where we're gonna go, we just know we need to get there quickly. So many of us are gonna feel like there's this sense of feeling like there is a demand to step into the unknown with total commitment. I've seen this more as like an unshakable sense of confidence or I would say courage or belief in the self, especially because Neptune is there. So I'd like to read to you guys the first Sabian symbol of all of the Sabian symbols. This is where it begins, and I'm going to be reading one of Aries because that's the first one. And this degree is going to give us a little snippet of what we should be expecting when this cycle starts. And something to kind of keep in the back of your mind is that Neptune is there as well. So that's a little bit of a different flavor. So Aries 1, a woman rises out of water, a seal rises and embraces her. Okay, so the keyword is realization. The theme is the way to begin is to begin. The symbol speaks to birth, emergence, and taking the first faltering and naive steps on any journey. It also speaks to the stirring within that signals the realization of potential and the possibilities of growth. The image of a woman rising out of water, seal rises and embraces her, depicts the feminine, emotional, and receptive or passive side of man embraced by the masculine purposeful and initiating or active side of himself. The image is also symbolizes the human spirit embraced by desire. The emphasis here is on achievement and self-integration or the mystical union of all of the elements of the self. On a practical level, the image represents the first degree of the Zodiac and thus spring, the beginning of a new cycle and freedom of choice. It also marks the starting point of the journey of self-discovery. At its highest, it represents independence, initiative, and openness to a new experience, but negative, watch for willfulness or lack of discrimination. The accent is on change, new beginnings. You may be feeling bored, restless, or lonely, or something is missing in your life. Adventure beckons, and the sweet scent of lilacs on a gentle spring wind, the novel and different have a special allure. Okay, so your opportunity lies and your greatest advantage lies in being sensitive to what you really need. Take a broader look at options available to you, window shop, and pay close attention to timing. Guard against rashness and hasty decisions by making irrevocable commitments. Avoid jumping from the frying pan into the fire by being headstrong and stubborn in relationships with others. Stepping stones are birth, new beginnings, growth, self-integration, new cycles of experience, freedom of choice, and receptivity. So interesting. It always makes me feel like the Venus kind of being born of like the seashell. Like you see that famous, image. I'm looking at it as I'm talking to you guys. It's Sandro Botticelli, where you see her standing in the shell and she's got all like the wind in her hair and like all the angels are coming up around her. Very Saturn-Neptune, right? Especially when I think about Neptune's connection with the sea and art and mysticism and also anything that's like saintly or holy. And Saturn creating that standard, that structure of what it is to be beautiful. And the birth of Venus is probably one of the most like famous images throughout history, I think, in art. But I think an application to this degree that's getting triggered, it really means that we're kind of tapping into untapped potential. right? 0 degrees of Aries means we're just starting something. So we're learning something new about ourselves. We're learning how to do something new. We're realizing where we can be stronger, where we can be faster, we can be more self-reliant, but also a lot more mature, which is really what Saturn wants. And I think that this is about really embracing raw creativity, really realizing our dreams through grounded action and taking necessary steps forward. So for this transit, I think it's really highlighting Saturn's entry at 0 degrees of Aries as like a potent rebirth in the area of Aries in your chart. So take a look at which house that is. This is where structure is meeting inspiration to kind of manifest something that's going to be quite profound. Now it's potent at that 0 degrees Aries point because it's the world axis point. So it's supercharged with this new initiatory kind of energy. And this is really where personal will meets collective destiny, especially because Neptune talks about the collective. Aries is the individual. Saturn represents bringing that structure. And I keep saying the word for 2026 is accountability. Many of you guys will be surprised that if you are taking small steps forward throughout the next couple of weeks and you're initiating small changes in your habits, your health, your daily routine, and this is really putting it into action, not just waiting to receive, you'll start to see it kind of take off like wildfire, and it's going to inspire other people to do the same thing. What's beautiful about this is that transits here actually really do amplify global shifts. And so I think it's safe to say it's a shift in human consciousness. It's people waking up, right? Realizing that they have to see things clearly. They have to start something. They need to start, kind of moving forward. And with Saturn here, you'll see that these ripples will start to kind of, go outward. So I think it's like a cosmic reset for building new realities. And really, it starts with accountability and some good old-fashioned hard work and effort. Now, we are seeing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that is brewing, okay? So you guys are watching it for the week of February 8th through the 15th, but we're already in the Saturn-Neptune conjunction energy. It's within a degree, so it won't actually conjunct until the 20th. We'll see that obviously next week, and that'll be at 0 degrees and 45 minutes of Aries. So their energies through the conjunction will blend, and we're going to be really seeing this pretty much, I would say, February through about April. Neptune's going to be hovering back and forth between a 0 and like 4 degrees. Saturn will move on. It's not going to come back to the 0 degree point, but it's creating this pinpoint in time, right? Timing is really, really, really significant with astrology. So the universe does not make any errors. I think the conjunction at 0 degrees really is kind of saying, okay, this is this rare alignment that we actually haven't seen since the 1700s. We saw it back then, but it wasn't at the same degrees, but it was close. And what it's doing is it's dissolving old illusions while kind of building tangible dreams. So I do expect on one hand, this is going to be kind of a blend of reality checks and things that are in your face. You can't look away. You have to do something about it now. But for others, it's going to feel like this inspired vision, and especially around leadership and I think like innovation. Now, last year when we saw Saturn move from Pisces back into Aries in 2025, so we saw this happen, in the spring, and then we also saw it happen in September. It gave us a preview of this energy. And so I think that really what I've observed is that there has been sudden like urges and quick shifts because things move quickly with Aries, and calls for independence, right? What can I do? What can I build? What am I capable of? Or why is this happening to me? We've also seen lots of clashes with authority, and Saturn notoriously, I think, has a difficult time in this sign because Aries represents kind of the youth, the younger people, the inexperienced, the beginners, and Saturn is traditionally associated with Capricorn and Aquarius, which is much more about leadership and elders and long-standing positions of power. So you're going to see that kind of clash as Saturn goes through that sign. I have also seen it kind of materialize as the need to structure chaotic emotions. And I think that that was partially because it was coming from Pisces, right? Each sign is going to build off of the sign that came before it. Pisces is the last sign. It's about conclusions, completions, kind of self-undoing, hiding, drinking, drugging, sabotaging, and things that are just like smoke and mirrors. And so Aries is looking at what has happened with the kind of Pisces party that's happened the last few years. Saturn was there for several years. Neptune was there for 14 years. And now it's really, I think, inspiring individuals to be like, I got to do something, or I got to see clearly. I think it is going to create a mass awakening. I think we're going to see a lot of people who are going to be more into fitness, people who are going to be more into taking action, people who are going to be wanting to really go at life raw, and that may mean be sober or be more serious, or I think hold themselves to a higher standard, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It has sparked global debates on personal freedom versus societal rules, as is expected, because Aries is the individual, while Pluto in Aquarius is kind of like the masses and what's kind of going on with the collective meltdowns. And we have seen it materialize as some economic tightenings and major shakeups when it comes to leadership. Now, as for what this transit's going to feel like, I mean, you have to kind of reflect on what happened last year. But to me, it kind of feels like a boot camp for this inner warrior that we have inside. Frustrating at times with delays and not being able to have knee-jerk reactions, 100%. Because Aries just wants to get there, and it wants to get there quickly. It doesn't think about finishing the job, doing it appropriately, taking its time. And these are all things that Saturn is going to want us to do. So it's going to really test our patience. It's going to also test to see whether or not we are planning, if we are taking personal accountability, if we're being mature. And the whole goal here is to feel empowered as we learn to channel this fire into focused goals. So you'll feel a push to grow up. A lot of people are going to be feeling that way. I've seen it a lot in my life. I've seen it a lot with my clients. But I think that's the positive side of Saturn. I think that it's really about taking charge and kind of proving that we are actually up to the task of doing things ourselves. Now, Mars is the dispositor of Saturn, so that means that for the next several years, we really want to pay attention to Mars transits when it's conjunct outer planets, opposing things, when it's involved in eclipses. Mars is going to be really important to watch. And so when we see Saturn go into Aries, Mars is a part of the planets that are still in that gang in Aquarius. So it's going to be a little bit of an interesting spin, because obviously this is a fixed air sign traditionally associated with Saturn. So we're still looking at the karmic limitations. Also, it's about timing, it's about maturity. But the modern day ruler is Uranus, and we've been watching all of these planets coming into a square with Uranus in this last week. So there's been some shakeups. We've got a few more that are still yet to kind of come through. And Mars in this sign is innovative, it's detached, it's group oriented. So if it's the dispositor for Saturn and Neptune in Aries, it's adding a more cool kind of strategic edge. So think like collective action over solo impulses, and really maybe using tech or networks to build structures to help give individuals a path forward. Now, Saturn is a bit challenged in this sign. Saturn is in its fall here, which means that it kind of feels like it's in an uncomfortable space. It's in an environment where it doesn't feel like it can execute all of the things that it wants to do. It doesn't have the ability to know how to lead or govern or take responsibility. I've used the phrase several times. It's like Saturn in Aries is, telling a toddler to put on a suit, take a briefcase, go to work, and do Excel spreadsheets, right? It does not know how to do those things. And rightfully so, because they're a little kid. They have no experience. They have not gained that experience yet to get to that point. So it doesn't mean that Saturn is powerless. I actually feel like it's just really teaching us that, hey, we have to do the work harder to express some of its core qualities. So Saturn represents structure, discipline, responsibility, boundaries, karma, and long-term growth through effort and restriction. So no pain, no gain. This is a sign that it clashes with, I think, these traits, because it results in kind of feeling more challenged or delayed. Fall is basically also kind of saying that it's like almost like a reversal of where the planet really likes to be. Obviously, we know that Saturn is traditionally exalted in Libra, which is about balance, fairness, equality, diplomacy, the rule of law, relationships. And so now individuals are going to be feeling the personal impact and the karmic implications if we're not trying to work together with other people, considering other people. I also think that, for Saturn here, it's really kind of really highlighting that it's this raw, impulsive energy that's going to test Saturn's patience. Now, as Aries is a cardinal sign ruled by Mars, it embodies this kind of quick action and independence. It's got a pioneering spirit, and sometimes it can be known for being aggressive and impatient. Well, Saturn, on the other hand, it's very slow, right? It has like a process, and it prefers caution over haste. So it's the planet that does not deny, it'll delay. And if it does deny, it's going to deny things because it's not meant to be. So Saturn has a tendency to say no before it says yes, and it really wants you to build brick by brick. So this kind of mismatched friction kind of comes up with Saturn in this sign. And I think a lot of that's because Aries wants to charge headfirst into something, while Saturn is really demanding planning and accountability. So historically, this debilitation stems from, ancient astrological systems where planets are kind of assigned to certain strengths based off of their elemental and kind of, their modal capabilities. Aries is hot and dry, and it debilitates because Saturn's kind of cold and dry, restrictive vibe leads to potential blockages or overcompensations. Now, the cons of having Saturn in this sign, because you are going to see some cons, and we have already seen some of them, to be fair, is that this placement will amplify struggle, okay? And that's why I said, if there's no pain, there's no gain. And that's really, I think, something that I kind of look at when I'm looking through Saturn going through this sign, especially when we start to see things really heat up about mid-February through March, as planets will come into conjunction with Saturn. We're going to see Saturn and Neptune are going to conjunct. We're going to see planets go into Aries, obviously, in March going into April. And so what you'll see is that there's frustration in delays in action. Part of that's because it's still trying to get its sea legs. It's also partially because it's sitting at that 0 degrees. So it's not really entirely sure where to start or where to begin. Neptune's going to kind of put us in a bit of a daze, and we're going to feel stunned with some of the world events that are happening, or we're going to feel shocked, or we're not going to know what to trust or what to believe in. But as it progresses forward, we're going to figure it out. So initiatives might start off with a lot of enthusiasm and then hit a roadblock. That's something that I've seen a lot with, Saturn connections to Aries. It teaches us harsh lessons about impulsivity, and when we're kind of like trigger happy, or, we have a knee-jerk reaction. And it can feel like every bold move that we're making is met with some like red tape, or that there is a setback. And it leads for a lot of us, I think, to burnout if we're not patient, okay? So you want to think of the next 2 years as not necessarily a sprint, right? This is going to be an obstacle course that is going to be a long distance race. And we really need to pace ourselves so we can kind of get the vibe of Saturn in this sign, especially because Saturn's going to be sitting within the first decan this year. So a lot of it is us individually kind of getting online with what we need to do on a personal level. It'll bridge into the second decan as it passes 10 degrees briefly later this year, where we start to see it kind of expand out into the world and we start to integrate these new things. And then next year we'll deal with Saturn in the later degrees. But I think that the other thing I would watch for in this particular sign is identity and ego clashes. Aries rules the self, and it's about the personal identity. So Saturn here can bring a lot of self-doubt. It can be like this feeling of, oh my gosh, can I do this? Am I capable? Can I see things clearly? Am I going to be okay? Can I handle this? And it brings up this sense of feeling inadequate. So people might overcompensate by becoming overly rigid, or feeling like they're just very militant. That's something that we can see with Saturn in this sign, or super hyper masculine, or very strong, and kind of like showing off. So we can see that. And that's also because, Saturn in this sign is notorious for, authority figures, and we can see authoritarian issues, totalitarianism kind of going on out in the world. And it can create a lot of issues. And I think that for leaders, it's going to be interesting to watch, because some people are going to, put a lot of faith in leaders because they're going to be fresh, new, young blood that are going to be on the scene, but not know whether or not they can actually lead, or they could lack experience. We can also see situations where all the dinosaurs are leaving. People who have worked for companies for a long time or have been in high positions of power or government might suddenly vanish, and they're going to leave. And so it's going to leave individuals going like, well, who's like running the show? Now, there can be people just in general who are also avoiding leadership altogether because they're afraid of failure. And so if you're not willing to risk something, you don't get to play the game. That's how this is going to work now. So if you guys are willing to take chances, obviously we want them to be calculated, and you want to take your time as you're gaining experience. That's a good way to play this. If you can do that, then you're actually going to find that you might find strength in yourself and changes with your career and positive things that can happen, and you become a lot more self-sufficient and self-reliant. Now, we do see physical health strains with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. People have been lethargic. We've seen a lot of issues with sinuses, headaches, migraines, ENT issues, because that's all the realm of Aries. But also like mental health stuff, because Saturn's been conjunct, obviously, Neptune. And so Saturn can manifest in a way where it's bringing up this feeling of feeling blocked or feeling lethargic. And Aries governs the head. So all these things that I was talking about, issues with the head and also vitality is likely going to arise. And we can see that energetically, we kind of feel like, okay, am I going to stay in bed? Am I just going to sleep this off? Or am I going to get up and kind of move my body? Movement is really important with Aries. Okay, so I've told a lot of people physical fitness, hot saunas, infrared lights, anything that's going to be minimalizing inflammation is really important, because we can feel a little weighed down and it can lead to lower motivation and chronic fatigue. So you want to kind of keep an eye on that. Because Saturn is the Lord of karma, I think we can see, with it being in the opposite sign of its exaltation, that there can be karmic tests in relationships. And like a lot of individuals are going to find themselves alone as a result of not doing their due diligence to work well with other people, to seek support, to collaborate, to work in relationships, to work relationship issues out. And we're going to see this across the board. This will happen, obviously in mundane astrology, this particular transit with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction can highlight global tensions around authority and individualism. So like leadership crisis or restrictive policies that can spark some kind of rebellion is likely, especially with Mars being the dispositor in Aquarius. But personally, it might actually strain relationships where one person is demanding freedom while the other one is trying to enforce the rules. And enforcing boundaries is going to be quite difficult with Saturn at 0 degrees. Saturn conjunct Neptune is a lot of people not being self-aware and not either standing up for themselves or not, taking care of themselves, or not getting sober, not taking initiative. And so if they're just not doing that and they want to be in that perpetual state of feeling like the victim, things are not going to work out in a relational sense very well. And you won't just see that in the immediate next month or two. You're really going to see that play out later this year when we get into Libra season, when planets start opposing, Saturn, and we see a Venus retrograde that's going to, be happening from Scorpio into Libra. So there's going to be major tests in relationships between now and the fall. Now, I think the other thing you want to watch for is like over-reliance on force, right? Because Aries just wants to kind of headbutt things. That's what it's known for doing. It's the ram. And I think without balance, this can actually lead to harsh self-discipline that almost borders on self-punishment. Maybe projecting some of your restrictions or stern expectations onto other people, thus creating conflict. But overall, we can see that it can actually make us feel like, even though it's an uphill battle, it's forcing us to really confront issues of immaturity and unchecked ego so we can kind of clear the air. Now, there are positives to this transit, and I've been working with a lot of younger people who have Saturn and Aries, and it's been fun to kind of talk to these people. As like a Saturn and Capricorn person, it's very fascinating because they have a lot of qualities that are very admirable, and it's also fun to watch them prior to going into their Saturn return, where they're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm like, it's a 2.5-year process. Take your time. But there are some positives. The debilitation is not all doom and gloom. It's often where the most profound evolution actually happens. And so the state of the planets and the aspects that it's making in your chart is really going to tell you what's going to happen. But planets that are in their fall can actually rise up through effort, and they can turn that weakness into strengths, especially if it's going through some of your personal planets in Aries, or if you're having a Saturn return, or if you're an Aries rising. I think you guys will look back and you'll go, that was a difficult year, but that was the year that I did it all by myself. Now, the positive is, from what I've seen, it's about building unbreakable resilience. And that's what I really love about Saturn and Aries. A lot of these youngsters are really kind of facing problems head on, and they're having to put out all of these like mini fires in their life, and then they're recognizing and realizing they're the ones standing there holding the match. So Saturn teaches us to temper these impulses. We have to do it with strategy. This can also forge incredible inner strength, and it can really act like a sword that's being refined in the flames. So I think of like leaders who will emerge from trials with earned authority, okay? Because we've seen this throughout, the past. I mean, I think about historically, one figure was like Albert Einstein. He had Saturn in Aries, and he channeled it into pioneering science. So it can be positive in that sense, where it tests us, but eventually then we end up kind of earning our badges and all of our, our trophies and all of those things, because we were able to accomplish something that couldn't be done. It's also a major catalyst for bold innovation. So this tension that we're going to see with Saturn and Aries is going to spark some creative problem solving, which I think is good. I think a lot of individuals are going to go, I'm in a problem. What do I do? How do I fix it? And the aspects that we're going to see to Pluto, opens up the opportunity to connect to new communities. The sextiles that we're also going to be seeing to Uranus later this year is about connecting to local communities, learning, writing, sharing, podcasting. So this tension creates the opportunity to start figuring out solutions. So we can then initiate responsibility by, leading to breakthroughs in personal or professional life. Aries is the entrepreneur, right? It is the self-starter. It is the person who did it first. So it's going to be interesting to watch because a lot of new entrepreneurs are going to come online. We're going to see a lot of activists. And I think this transit is really just like a powerhouse for starting ventures that last as long as you have a plan. We will see that there will be a lot of maturity and self-assertion. I think Aries, because it's combative by nature and it wants to fight, or wants to kind of use weapons, or it wants to kind of be, it's by nature very animalistic. It's about survival. I think it's going to be teaching us that we can claim our independence, and we can do that without the combativeness. We can do that without war. We can do that without fist fights. We can do that without being reckless and being harmful. And it's about healing karmic patterns around assertiveness. So over time, we may find that we're actually developing this warrior spirit, confident, but not arrogant. And I think that's really important, especially because the first kind of decan of Aries does deal with Mars. So we're kind of going to see where, by launching missiles or starting wars or getting into arguments or battles or being confrontational, that it's actually showing a side of our weakness, right? That if we are quick to anger, that can actually be something that's really not helping us in the long term and kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Now, as for, moving into like the global and some of like the collective things that are going to be happening, I think globally on a worldly scale, Saturn in Aries has more historically coincided with reforms that have challenged outdated structures. So during past transits, we've seen advancements in civil rights or technology emerge from conflict. And that's because it encourages society to kind of grow up and how we handle power and how we take initiative. We'll also see personal empowerment through discipline. So the pro here is that it really shines when you embrace the lessons. Regular routines, right? Like exercise, goal setting, can really transform frustration into achievement. So it becomes empowering to prove that you can actually handle the heat. So in essence, Saturn in Aries is kind of like a boot camp for our soul. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be transformative. And if this is hitting your chart hard, leave me a comment below. Let me know what it's conjuncting or squaring or opposing. My recommendation to you guys would be focus on small, consistent actions, one foot in front of the other. You just have to start something. And if you're too afraid to start something, if you don't know how to get going, you have to get motivated. I do think that journaling intentions, I am affirmations, working even with a mentor, or even like Mars-ruled activities like martial arts, hot yoga, hot meditation, sunshine, like I said, infrared saunas, all those things can be really helpful, and you can channel some of this energy more positively over the next couple of months. Now, to navigate the shifts this week, lean into discipline, okay? That's the one thing I would tell you. As a Saturn-Neptune person myself, it took me a long time to kind of realize that where Saturn-Neptune was in my chart was not the boogeyman. It was actually probably one of the strongest aspects that I could have in my natal chart. Traditional astrologers will tell you that Saturn-Neptune conjunctions are connected with great loss and sorrow and depression and feeling conflicted and limited and restrained or isolated. And I'll be the first one to tell you that is all true. But in the midst of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's kind of brewing, I think that what we can find can be like a total endless like summer. Sometimes the dark night of the soul is absolutely necessary in order to kind of illuminate things and be able to show us things that have been hiding around and creating some issues karmically for a very long time. So as we start to see, the opportunities that arise this week where it is going to feel like limitations or delays or pressure, lean into that. And try to apply some discipline without losing your spark. Have a to-do list, right? Write something down. You have to do it now. Do it that day. Get it done. Set clear intentions, because this is all about releasing kind of like the Pisces era illusions. If we take small, consistent steps forward, we're actually going to see down the road later this year, we will have actually created a lot of change. I would also meditate on boundaries, journal about your ambitions, surround yourself with supported people. I think that's huge with some of the sextiles we're going to see to Pluto and Aquarius. People who are going to encourage your growth and not make you feel kind of isolated or separate. I do think drawing from Saturn and Aries themes at the 0 point, there's not very many times that we have seen that happen where Neptune is nearby. I mean, as I've said in previous videos, it's been like 6,000 years since we saw Saturn-Neptune conjunct in Aries. But I do anticipate that we're going to see massive leadership overhauls. A lot of people complaining, saying this last year, this is happening, that's happening, nothing's getting done. But this is where people start to take matters into their own hands. And now complaining or kind of not wanting to look at things now transforms into a situation where things are so uncomfortable, they're so limiting, people are so unhappy, they're gonna go, that's it, I'm gonna do something about this. And I think that this will manifest as government reforms. I think we'll see that it's really emphasizing individual rights. Economic restructuring is expected, so tighter budgets, innovations in finance. Business booms in tech startups can happen, but I do think that we're going to see a lot of market volatility really now through April, and not in a good way. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And obviously potential conflicts over who's in charge and where the individual begins and where, the state ends, or where the federal state ends, or where, leaders are infringing too much on, people's freedoms. So think protests, right? And potential opportunities through some of that new vision that's being born, that people are going to be standing up for their rights a little bit more. And on the other hand, we will also see that there will be possibly new regulations, limitations. Well, Neptune's in the mix too, So Neptune could be water. I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, but at least on independent media, you're not going to hear this on your news. But quietly over the last couple of weeks, we have been hearing Bill Gates has been scooping up more farmland, buying up, utility companies, anything that deals with water treatment. BlackRock's doing the same thing. We're starting to hear about major companies that are moving in, like Nestle has been for many years, who believe that, water is not necessarily a human right, access to water. Saturn-Neptune will be things that deal with water, right? And whether water is healthy, if it's contaminated, if it's going to be potential places where there could be, terrorist attacks, I hope not, where there could be infections and other things that are coming up as a result of people's kind of water, or anything that deals with flooding. I know that's been happening. I've been seeing that going on in parts of Spain and Portugal. And I think we could see rapid flooding, and that could be literally or figuratively flooding of emotions, flooding of, people that are immigrating, or kind of a mass exodus of certain countries. And we can also see that this can cause a major, major kind of shift in terms of human consciousness. And so a lot of people, I think, are going to struggle with it. But I do think that on the other side of this, when we see the collapse of the old world, because the old illusions is Saturn and Neptune, what will be is a fresh start and a new beginning. Now, personally, you have to look at your chart. So you have to see what house it's in. That's going to tell you where this new kind of turning point is, and where you're going to be really focusing on some new initiative, and there's some new karma coming in. But it's really just going to be testing us personally when it comes to our identity and the initiative, and like really pushing us to build resilience through some of these challenges. Yes, we're going to face karma around impulsiveness, and it's also going to lead to maturity in how we kind of assert ourselves. And I think ultimately it's empowering, really helping us kind of claim our path with ease and also earned confidence. So let's get into the week ahead. Let's take a look at what's going to be happening for February 8th through the 14th, 2026. If you guys are watching this on Sunday, happy Sunday to my Sunday crew. Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. Seeing a lot of growth. I've been getting a lot of really great comments. I've gotten flooded with a lot of emails this week. So thank you guys for your emails. You're super kind. Thank you for taking me with you to go and run your errands, go to the store, work out, hang out with your dog, your kids, whatever you're doing. I'm glad to be here. Now, if you're waking up on the 8th in the morning, the moon is in Scorpio. So we know what that means, right? A little moody, a little intense. And obviously it's picking up the energy of Mars and Pluto, which are both in the same sign. So there is a lot of emotions coming up about the changes that are happening in society, the transformations, the feelings of, kind of like electricity that's running through all of our bodies. And it can also be talking about just a little bit of tension and a little bit of stress that's connected to what's happening socially. Now, the moon it has already squared Pluto, but it will square Mars today, and then we will see it continuing to move through a trine to the North Node in Pisces. And that's pretty much all that we're kind of seeing that's going on with the moon, and I'll take you guys through that in the important times. Venus in Aquarius is still squaring Uranus. It was actually squaring Uranus over the weekend, so Friday, Saturday in particular, was when we saw that Venus-Uranus square. So lots of, I'm assuming, going to be more drama and things kind of connected to crypto markets and financial kind of instability as Venus and Uranus have mutual reception. In our world, though, outside of like what's going on financially, there could be difference of opinions on money, on values. There could be some friction in relationships with friendships and some social things that are kind of going on. So there's been a little tension in the air, I think, over the last like 24 to 48 hours. What you're going to find in terms of aspects is that as the Scorpio moon continues to move through this sign, it's going to pick up a square to Mars, and that's going to be happening right around the 2 p.m. hour. So I'm here Central Time in Texas. You might have to adjust your time zone. But mid-afternoon, we've got the Scorpio moon squaring one of its rulers, and this is a superior square. So it's a lot of Scorpio moon things, exposing things coming out on the internet, stuff that deals with crime, sex, scandals, things that are a little bit more morbid or a little bit more taboo. And it will square to 12. So I do think that there's going to be more information drops, possibly videos, footage, things like that. That's got some like damning information as the moon is coming into its last quarter square. Now, after it squares Mars in the afternoon hours, it's going to keep moving, and you're not really going to see too much other than that. First thing in the morning, it looks like the moon was in a trine with Pisces North Node. So that's nice because that means that there is a sense of intuitively feeling like we're navigating and uncovering things or doing research or reevaluating like what negative or toxic emotions do we need to release or kind of get out. And then, like I said, Venus in Aquarius is still squaring Uranus in Taurus. So there's still some tension in the air. A lot of the fixed squares can really materialize as like this unyielding will or unwillingness to kind of change. So we can see some stubbornness, we can see some kind of fixed tendencies. And so I think that really the daily vibe for the astrology on Sunday the 8th is just deep emotions are really bubbling up today. Maybe it means that we're blending intuition with unexpected shakes in relationships or values because that moon is trining the North Node. It feels electric. It feels like it's urging us to kind of like release what isn't really serving us and kind of aligning with things even though it feels uncomfortable and embracing more authentic connections. I think to navigate Sunday, it's about kind of grounding yourself, okay? So, we might see some people that are a little impatient with the moon square Mars. We could see a little bit of tension on the internet or in social groups. Avoid any impulsive decisions when it comes to love or money is something else that I would really recommend with, Venus square Uranus. Use the tension to kind of innovate rather than to react. Now, by the end of the evening, Venus is now coming out of the square with Uranus. The moon is going to keep moving on, and that's really all that's going to be happening. So this is going to take us into Monday. And when we wake up Monday morning, the moon is still in Scorpio, and now we're in the last quarter square. Okay, pull out your red pens, circle Monday, because this is going to be a bit of a manic Monday. This is that last square that we have before we get to the solar eclipse in Aquarius, which is going to be next week. All right. So guess what? We've already been feeling the effects of the eclipse coming in since the Leo full moon. This is when it's going to start to hit. With Venus square Uranus, the shakeups with love and money, check. Moon in Scorpio squaring Sun in Aquarius, which is saying, hey, there's more stuff that's going to come up that's going to rock and rattle and roll the collective, check. And then we're also going to be seeing that now the sun is starting to kind of make its way into a square with Uranus by the end of the week. So on Monday, I feel like there's a lot going on. And especially if you have anything, I would say, 15 to about 25 degrees of the fixed signs, you're going to be feeling the effects of this, that pressure of that, the eclipse that's coming in. And these are new eclipses, guys. So if you happen to have anything that's going to be like the last, I would say 10 degrees or so of the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you guys are preparing to have an eclipse that's foreshadowing the nodal change that's going to come later this year. Now, I think that what I would also watch, other than the fact that it's the last quarter square, is that the moon also has to come into a square with Venus, right? So it's kind of picking up some of the same intensity that was going on Sunday. So you'll start to see the moon oppose Uranus. That's going to happen in the afternoon hours, right around here. And that's going to be around actually like early evening. So 6, 7 p.m. the moon's opposing Uranus. And that means that there's like a lot of like emotional volatility. And we're probably going to be hearing a lot about changes that are going on with the markets and things that are changing with rates and what's kind of happening with finance. And also a lot of things that are connected to not just trading, but Taurus is the bond market, things that are connected also to printing money, things that are going to be connected to anything that deals with banks and institutions. So my eye is on the moon that's kind of in a bit of a funk in Scorpio, the opposition to Uranus, which feels like people are reacting very strongly and kind of fearfully to some destabilizing things going on with financial markets. And then the square to Venus, which is going to be at 29 degrees. So we've got a lot of planets that are hitting those late degrees, the same place where we're going to see the eclipse that's going to be in Aquarius. So there's a lot going on. I think that if this were me, I would just watch on Monday. You know, I would be really careful with making any knee-jerk reactions financially. I think that there's some tension that's really going to be kind of building, and it's around letting go. Moon in opposition to Uranus is negative emotions, anything that's going to be emotionally destabilizing, anything that's going to feel scary, anything that's toxic. And as it squares Aquarius, it might mean that's coming up in, you know, friendships or on stuff online or things that are even connected to relationships, right? Venus. So emotional insights are going to clash with fixed ideas. But evening brings a little bit more stability, I think, in kind of helping us process this release. And that's because we are going to see that the moon is going to be shifting signs overnight. Now, the last aspect that you're going to see the moon is going to make is it's going to oppose Uranus in the evening, and then it's going to start coming into a trine with Saturn in the overnight hours. But guys, my eyes get big, 29, 29, 29. You know, there's 27. I mean, planets are at late degrees, which means they're getting ready to conclude and kind of wrap up some very big things. Could there be some stuff that's happening in the overnight hours that is definitely kind of job dropping? Yeah, that can happen, you know, the 9th going into the 10th. But remember that this is all about letting go of things and not holding on to things, and old outdated values seem to be the theme as both of these planets, Venus is squaring Uranus as well as the moon in Taurus. Uranus and Taurus and the moon in Scorpio. So to navigate, I think on Monday, this is really about focusing on closure, right? We're coming into that last quarter square, decluttering our space or maybe even our mind. Maybe this is going to be about trusted routines that we lean on to kind of handle some of the surprises that can kind of come up and help us feel a little bit more stabilized. Now, as this works its way into Tuesday the 10th, overnight hours, moon's going to go into Sag. We're going to wake up in the morning on Tuesday, and the moon is in Sagittarius, which is now going to be putting a highlight on Jupiter, which is still retrograde right now in Cancer. So there's a lot of reflecting on emotions, home, family, and the past. As the moon goes through Sag, it's definitely a vibe shift. So we can feel a little bit more optimistic. We can feel a little bit more open-minded. We can also feel that we're more open to learning and traveling, education, all of those kind of like Saggy things. And one of the first aspects that it's going to make, granted it's early, is it will trine Neptune. So there is this newfound kind of belief and optimism in our visions, ourselves, our spiritual practice, our personal kind of dreams, right? Neptune and Aries. So with the moon moving into Sag, it's nice off the bat, but it's also going to be, and it has been overnight, in a square with Venus. So it can also talk about some like changes with our emotions and security and values. Now, you're also going to see when it goes into Sagittarius in the morning, it's sextiling Pluto. So it's great for, communicating and connecting with other people, maybe traveling and connecting other people. It can also mean that we're learning in groups or some kind of community. So you've got some outs here with the trine to Neptune and the sextile to Pluto, but it gets a little sticky because as the moon goes through Sagittarius, it's going to have to square Mercury in Pisces, and it's also going to have to square the north and the south node. So I would actually deem Tuesday as quite a fateful oriented day. And then also Venus will be moving into Pisces, which is nice. I like that. Obviously, that's the place of her exaltation, so that's going to be sweet. I'll be working on a video for you guys on that this week. So overall, it's much easier to navigate, I would say, in the morning. And then once we start seeing the moon coming into a square with Mercury, traveling, communication, meetings, all of those things are like things are changing. And that's because it's mutable squares. Both are influenced by Jupiter, and Jupiter is retrograde. So that can mean that under the guise of Sag things, traveling, expanding, learning, and then Mercury and Pisces things, our intuition, our emotions. Jupiter being retrograde is saying things are still slowing down. We don't have the bigger picture yet about how we feel, what's going to happen in the world, what's going to change with potentially travel regulations, or what's going to be changing with weather events. Lots of confusion because I think the Sag moon wants to make things feel a little bit bigger and a little bit more optimistic. And then Mercury in Pisces is like, are things better? Are you sure about that? Like there's definitely like a difference of opinion. And, you know, Mercury in Pisces is notorious for emotions, right? And communicating emotions and trying to find the words. While the moon in Sagittarius wants to make everything seem like everything's kind of like okay, we might feel like some of the things, the emotions that we're kind of going through and what we're actually feeling on the inside just quite aren't meshing. Now, the positive is that you will feel the optimism though with that moon in Sag. And I think it's flowing and it's got a little bit of like dreamy kind of inspiration with the connections to, you know, Mercury in Pisces, Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. And we can also see that relationships can soften a little bit now that Venus is in Pisces. And so it's really inviting us to focus more on compassion. It can also be about romance and art and music and like that divine connection to Venus. And it'll be there for several weeks. And it'll be interesting to watch that because, you know, Venus will be moving through there, touching with the North Node, connecting with Mercury retrograde, clearing out a lot of relationship karma, clearing out a lot of things that deal with soulmates and, you know, people we had to let go and things that we need to heal, and kind of dealing with that in like a meditative state or on like the astral realm when we're sleeping. But I think that if this were me, you know, I would really look at this and go, okay, you know, Venus is going to soften relationships, but afternoon debates are very likely, and it's going to be challenging your beliefs and it's pushing you for some kind of growth. So to navigate this on the 10th, what you really want to focus on is dream big in the morning, right? Moon's still kind of in a sextile to Pluto. It's in a trine slightly to Neptune and Aries. And by the afternoon, listen more, argue less. That's my advice, okay? Saturn is in Neptune. Nobody knows what's going to happen yet, okay? Nobody knows. Even astrologers are like, we have to wait and see. And Saturn is in Pisces, which means a lot of people haven't really like woken up yet. And it's going to be about, you know, cultural beliefs. It's going to be about international, you know, kind of relations. It's going to be about things that are connected to religion or spirituality and a lot of clashing beliefs. And like the one thing I will say about Mercury in Pisces, with that square to the moon in Sagittarius, I have observed over the last several years when we have like a Mercury going into shadow and then the moon squares, watch leaders, right? So like watch people who are leaders of companies, leaders of countries, listen to what mayors or other people are saying, because they will say things that are like, oh, this sounds good, right? Mercury in Pisces, like it's going to be soothing, and this is the right thing to do, or the religious thing to do, the spiritual thing to do, or the compassionate thing to do. But likely it's being kind of glossed over and made to sound really good and inclusive, when in reality, it's like, wait a second, like we didn't sign up for this, or like this isn't our kind of philosophy, or like this isn't the masses kind of like religious practice. So why is this being projected onto people? And I've seen that. I mean, gotta be honest, I've seen it in this last week. So it's kind of something that I'm going to be watching for to see if we're going to be kind of hearing this coming out of the mouths of leaders. Anyway, what we're also going to be seeing is that if we're listening more and we're arguing less, we can really tap into that Mercury in Pisces. So we can really focus on empathy, because that can be the bridge that really allows us to close some of the gaps with other people and really kind of align to a higher purpose, a higher path, a better understanding with other people as well. But I would say, yeah, the 10th is not the day to be signing contracts, trying to organize things, trying to travel. We're going to run into some issues and some delays with some of that stuff, I think. All right, so now we're going to keep moving. The moon will come out of the square with Mercury by the early evening. And then it's going to keep moving through Sagittarius, and it looks like it's going to finish up the night starting to come into a sextile with Mars, but not quite yet. All right, so this is going to take us into February the 11th. And in the morning on the 11th, that moon is still in Sagittarius. Not much is changing with the ruler. Jupiter's still retrograde. It is going to be in conjunct Jupiter. So Jupiter retrograde is like the sense of reflecting, staying home. And Jupiter is like connection to Sag is, you know, do we learn more? Or do we focus on the past? You know, do we communicate with other people that we don't know or we don't understand? Or do we just kind of stick to what we know? So there's a little bit of like, are we in or are we out happening on the 11th. Now the moon will now sextile Mars in Aquarius, which is nice. We are also going to see that the moon will come into a trine with Chiron and Aries. And so these are fire trines. So action is very much Mars and Sagittarius. And I do think that there's like a lot of like talk of like, what we'll hear, especially through Mercury going through Pisces, like global alliances, global equality, things like that. So there may be opportunities to start to see that kind of coming through as the moon sextiling Mars is kind of saying, all right, like let's bridge the gaps, let's work together, you know, let's kind of close that common divide. Let's heal some of the issues that maybe we have had or some of the differences that we have had. And so the key transit that you're going to want to watch on the 11th is at some point you're going to see Mercury come into conjunction with the North Node. Now, if you guys haven't seen the video that I did on that, on Mercury and Pisces, definitely check it out because you're going to see this like on the 11th and on the 12th. I think it's happening overnight on the 11th into the 12th at its exact. But Mercury is going to be conjunct the North Node. So this is about destiny calling, fateful conversations, really strong intuitive hits, really crazy dreams, and also like reassessment and reevaluation of the Pisces area of the horoscope, because we're going to see that this is where Mercury is going to go into shadow. So we're going to start to see the shadow happen. So this means that this is the degree that Mercury is going to come back to when it goes retrograde and then it goes direct, which will be later in March. So even though the Mercury retrograde doesn't happen until the end of the month, surprise, Wednesday is the day that you start seeing the effects of the Mercury retrograde. Go back, think about what happened in the spring of 2025. We had a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, right? Saturn has been there, Neptune has been there. And this is like the last wave of dealing with all the Pisces messiness, I think pretty much February into March, and then, well, April's a different month. But what this also means is that if you need to, prepare for the Mercury retrograde, right? That means this is a good time prior to the 11th to sign your contracts if you need to do it, to make your travel plans, to double and triple check anything that you're kind of agreeing to, or if you're buying or leasing something, look for the details because they can get really blurry and kind of confusing and missing. But this is also interesting because Mercury is the ruler of the South Node. So it's in shadow, so that's about dealing with the past and bringing the past back up. It's in Pisces, which is about conclusions and completions, and what our gut has been telling us is actually coming. And then we've got the past South Node ruler coming into conjunction with the North Node. It's very obvious to me, and I said this in the video, we have to go back to the past and reevaluate and reassess where we went wrong in the past and how we can actually do things differently this time around. Just in a nutshell, I think that Mercury retrogrades are necessary. It's like cleaning out the fridge. And this one's actually going to be quite positive, I think, because of the connection with the North Node, because it's ruled by Jupiter, which is in Cancer exalted, because also it's going to be retrograde conjunct Venus. There's actually some really nice things that we're going to see during this Mercury retrograde period. So don't fear it. But do get prepared and kind of have an idea of where Mercury is going to retrograde in your chart in Pisces. I think it's going to be between like 8 and 22 degrees. So if you have any planets around there, you're going to be feeling it. I'm curious to see this Mercury conjunct the North Node because I think that healing energy is going to surge because the South Node in Virgo is like cleaning something out, like, getting rid of bad habits, getting organized. And now we're having to really channel this energy in a much more intuitive, empathic kind of way. It's not logical like it is with Virgo or with Gemini. It's more, oh, I have this feeling I should do this way, or I should be leaning into that, or I need to be, praying on this or meditating on this. And like that will start to kind of give us the clarity that we're looking for. So communication really aligns with destiny. Pay attention to numbers, sequences, messages, dreams, important meetings, conversations, and things like that, because the fact that Mercury is going to retrograde back to this means it's going to give us some kind of clarity down the road. The influence that this is also having with Jupiter is saying that it is about emotions because it's in an emotional sign. Strong time for ancestral work, I would say as well. Pisces does deal with like ancestors and spirit guides and angels and, ascended beings and all of that stuff. So we can actually really feel very strongly kind of deeply connected to getting back into spiritual practice, meditation, going back to church, reading scripture, whatever it is you guys want to do. But I do think that this is a time where, the spirit realms are going to be quite active in our dreams with helping us heal and process negativity and emotions. Stay hydrated is one thing I would say. And, if there's one thing Mercury in Pisces is really good for, is fortune telling, right? Divination, readings, talking to psychics, mediums, anything that can help decode, some things that are hidden or things that are tied to kind of our past lives. South Node in Virgo is going to deal more with health and systems. It's also about service and care. So we'll probably see throughout the cycle that there are some big announcements that are kind of starting to be released about some changes that's going to happen with hospitals or with schedules or anything that deals with health requirements or like mandates, any of those things, and maybe even an exposure of certain things, especially because 8 degrees does deal with poisons. So I think we're going to be hearing more about poisons and things that people have been using to clean their home, or things that people have been using for health-related matters, or things we've been eating. And then we're kind of finally realizing and getting adequate information that, yeah, certain things are actually not healthy for us. So I'll be watching that throughout the retrograde. Now, I do think to navigate Wednesday, speak your truth, but do it with kindness, okay? Pay attention to the intuitive hits, reflect on your future goals, just avoid overcommitting. As remember, Mercury is kind of shadow, is really hinting at some of the up and coming reviews that we're going to be seeing in the Pisces area of our charts. So we're going to keep moving. The moon is going to keep moving through Sagittarius. By the overnight hours, it's now starting to sextile the sun, which is the last nice aspect that we're going to be seeing before the solar eclipse. And that's going to take us into what is going to be the 12th, which is Thursday. And on Thursday, we wake up to the moon coming into a square with Saturn. Okay. And when this hits 29 degrees and this is sitting at 29 degrees, this is going to be very interesting to watch, because this is the last time that we are going to see something square Saturn at 29 degrees for like what, 29 years? I mean, at least in Pisces, at least, So I'm watching that going, all right, what's about to change? The moon obviously is going to deal with the public and what we're kind of responding to, or what we're kind of feeling, and the emotional shifts. And on the 12th, we're going to see that square come through here. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to square at 29 of Saturn around noon Central Time, 29. And then it's going to go into Capricorn, which is a totally different vibe, about 2 hours later, which is more, cardinal Earth. So it's going to be more about government, responsibility, work, structure. And now we've got 2 planets on Thursday that are sitting at 0 degrees cardinal points. And this one's connected to Mars. Mars isn't really doing anything. This one's connected to Saturn. Saturn's at 29. So we know that on the 13th, Saturn is going to change signs, right? So I think that we start seeing the effects of where government, leadership, other things are kind of coming into play, and trying to make big announcements or about changes that's going to be impacting individuals. And Mars is picking up the energy of it. And it's more or less basically saying it's going to create some ruckus, I think, for the collective. Now, what we will find is that as the moon is going through Capricorn, it is starting to sextile now Venus and also the North Node. So you'll see that kind of throughout the day, which is nice. But the moon in Capricorn is like emotional labor. And, Venus in Pisces is much more about maybe relief, or what they're doing to help people, or what they're doing to support people, or how they're giving back, or, anything like that. Especially the 12th house can be like things connecting to like nonprofit, or, helping those who are homeless, or who are in need, or who are hungry. So it can be talking about initiatives to be, helping these people, or helping women, right? Venus can be a woman, or things with women's health or women's rights in hospitals. So I'm kind of wondering if something's going to come up with that, especially knowing that Mercury will retrograde conjunct Venus. Now, this is the last day of Saturn in Pisces. Yes, I'm excited for it. I'm so ready for it. I feel like the craziest things have happened when Saturn and Neptune were at 29 degrees. So this one might go off with a bang. I think on the 12th, this is really about, there's some morning illusions. That moon squaring Saturn is like, we can't see clearly, right? We can't see anything, and everything's connected to Jupiter, which is retrograde in Cancer. So a lot of us are stuck in our emotions, stuck in the past, feeling like we don't want to go out, we don't want to do anything. This is also going to be a time where this is this wrap up of the emotional kind of loose ends as Saturn is getting ready to kind of move out of Pisces and move into Aries. So it brings closure. I think it's softened, thankfully, with the sextile to Venus, so it can have a loving kind of feel to it. But I really believe that on Thursday, this is about tying up unfinished business. It's by the evening, we're then shifting into, the sextile with Venus, which could be more about nurturing relationships. We can also find that this is really about kind of practical affection to kind of ease some of the transition. And whenever the moon goes through Capricorn, it's like we have to show up, we have to be responsible, we have to get things done. There's like a sense of having to kind of take care of things. So you might kind of feel like it's a little bit of a busier day than usual. But that sextile to Venus is nice come the evening hours, okay? All right, so as we move into Friday the 13th, how many of them are there this year? I heard somebody saying there was a couple of them. Not that I like buy into that stuff, but you know, it's interesting that we're gonna see that happening right around the time that Saturn and Neptune are going into Aries. So that's kind of scary in its own right. Okay, so we wake up in the morning on February 13th and the moon is in Capricorn. Now the moon is starting to come into a sextile with the North Node, which is about dissolving, releasing, practicing empathy, and Mercury, which is going to be about information and communication, maybe things that were top secret or hidden. And then also Mercury is still in shadow. We're not really seeing much else other than that. Throughout the day, the moon is going to keep moving through Capricorn. And then I'm watching Saturn. And here comes Saturn. It's getting ready to go into Aries. So it looks like it's going to be happening right around 7 p.m. Central Time-ish. That does not mean something has to happen on the 13th. Certainly something could. But I don't necessarily think that it's that. There's too many things happening at one time within a week, right? We've got the solar eclipse, which I think is on the 17th. We've got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the 20th. And then we've got the Saturn ingress on the 13th. So the 13th, the 20th, and then we've got the 17th. All those things together, you can't pick one particular day. Certainly you can see some of the aspects with the moon, but that's a lot of really big things that are happening all in one week. So this week and next week, things are going to be quite colorful. But I think that, you know, I would be watching the moon coming into an opposition with Jupiter, because I think that's pretty significant. You know, Jupiter is in a lunar sign, so the moon is kind of dictating and determining some things that are going on with Jupiter. So it can mean there are some emotional reactions to, you know, how people are feeling about their home country, their homeland, their living situation. The moon can represent where, you know, there's authority figures or government figures or kind of like leaders. And it is going to be at a 16 degrees. So it's going to be probably touching on some impacts of what's going on with currency. It can also be talking about what's going on with like home and property and things that are connected to the housing market. And then we're going to start to see the moon coming out of that sextile with Mercury. And then it starts to come out of the opposition in the evening hours. But yeah, Saturn and Neptune are going to be sitting conjunct these degrees for a couple of days. So it'll be important to watch. I think Neptune's only going to be there until like the end of February, I think it's right around the end of February, and then Saturn's not going to be there for very long either. So it's a very short window of time that we're going to see Saturn and Neptune kind of sitting there. Now, overnight, we'll see the moon keep going through Capricorn. So staying on Friday the 13th, let's go back. This is a powerhouse day. I mean, the moon Jupiter really feels like a knee-jerk reaction of some kind that the public is going to have. And with Saturn and Neptune coming into conjunction, I mean, you know, I just think back to the most recent Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the late 80s. The Berlin Wall came down, right? The dissolving of boundaries. So this time in Aries, it's not going to be quiet like it was in Capricorn. It's going to be loud. And I do think that it can be, I mean, on one hand, Aries is the rumblings of war, right? But it could also mean that there is going to be more people who are waking up and calling for there to be more independence, there to be more freedom for somebody to do something, quote unquote. We've also got Mars that's hovering right around the mid degrees of the fixed sign of Aquarius. So that's also like a pretty prominent turning point for like collective people and collective action and that kind of stuff. But this is the day that Saturn moves into Aries. So this is where ambition meets expansion. But Saturn's shift is really demanding disciplined step forward. So it's about kind of balancing these big dreams with Neptune being there with this kind of new energy. And I really think that we have to set realistic boundaries, right? And there could be some things going on where like governments are going to make some big statements and people are going to be like, okay, and it'll be like sheep going to the slaughter where they're going to say, yeah, this is a good thing. And then people are not going to realize what's actually really going on. That's my concern personally. I think to navigate the 13th, it's about setting kind of intentions for long-term goals. Maybe it means that you're avoiding excess in an area. You're focusing on steady progress to really kind of harness this new kind of initiatory energy. Now, by the evening, the moon's coming out of that opposition with Jupiter. So watch for like the emotional swings. And then that's going to be taking us into Saturday, which is going to be, for those of you guys who celebrate Valentine's Day, And it does not feel very loving to me, unfortunately. I think the only silver lining is that Venus is in Pisces. I do think that singles can naturally feel, you know, on Valentine's Day, they can just naturally feel like, what about me? Like, am I going to find someone? You know, but they may feel it even more this year with Saturn and Neptune being like, I'm alone, you know. And the positive is that Mars is in Aquarius, so going to singles parties, going to mixers, hanging out with friends, platonic relationships, that's totally fine. Not everybody wants to subscribe to Hallmark holidays. But it might hit a little bit harder for some people this year. That's just kind of like, okay, you know, how long am I going to be doing this? And unfortunately, the darker side of Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is I'm alone, I'm isolated, I'm in this like self-imposed prison. Does anybody see me? You know, how am I ever going to connect with somebody? And I would say, go and be around other people who are going to be your tribe. That's really the name of the game, I think, with navigating these transits. Now, the moon is still going through Capricorn. So we are still feeling the effects of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction because Saturn obviously is connected to Capricorn. Now, it will come into a square with Chiron, so there could be some ruffled feathers here on Saturday morning. And that's because that moon in Capricorn is just like all work, very little emotion, very determined, you know, wanting to get something done. And the square to Chiron is like, well, this doesn't feel good. You know, I don't feel like I have independence or freedom, or I'm feeling overworked or underpaid. It's still picking up some of that opposition to Jupiter as well. So the cardinal signs are really going to feel that one. I wonder if there's going to be, you know, people feeling upset or agitated about some kind of military action or mobilization, because that can be Aries. It can also mean that, you know, like veterans could be very critical of what's going on with, you know, government decisions or kind of moves when it comes to operations or anything with the Navy. Saturn and Neptune could be about military action on coastal cities, Navy bases, that kind of stuff. Now, after it comes out of a square with Chiron, it's going to keep moving. And we're not really going to see much other than the trine to Uranus. And it will trine Uranus in the evening hours, which makes me feel like a lot of people are going to be like doing their celebrating later in the evening when they're like, I'm off of work or I'm done doing what I need to get done, blah, blah, blah. And the moon trine Uranus can be positive. It can mean because we have been able to be a little bit more serious, mature, and committed. You know, we can focus on good changes, good food changes, financial changes, self-esteem shifts. I also feel like it's just good for like financial things just in general, generally, even though I don't think the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is. This means that if you're trying to get some financial affairs in order, get some work done, or deal with some accounting things, it can actually be quite positive. So we can be quite productive actually on the 14th. What you're going to find is that there's just healing hurdles that are going to rise, you know, in the morning when the moon in Capricorn is squaring Chiron and Aries. There are opportunities for those breakthroughs, though, that can be very innovative when the Capricorn moon trines Uranus in Taurus. The surprises is kind of what makes me feel like might happen. I think if there's people who are working on, you know, Saturday, they're surprised that somebody sends them a gift, or they're surprised that somebody comes in to see them. And those surprises can be good because it can rebuild confidence, and it can be about kind of embracing, you know, change in the way that we look at values and anything that's, I guess, tastes good, feels good, smells good. That's kind of the territory of Taurus. So to navigate on the 14th, face vulnerabilities head on. Channel the unexpected ideas that can kind of come up into practical innovations. And I think this is for personal growth and doing things differently and adjusting to some of the changes that are kind of happening, which I like. And I love that the moon's in Capricorn and it's saying personal boundaries, personal accountability, you know, our personal goals that are now kind of coming online. We're going to take this into the later evening on Saturday the 14th, and it looks like overnight we will then see the moon pop into Aquarius. This is taking us to February 15th, so first thing in the morning we wake up to the moon conjunct Pluto. All right, so the moon's conjunct Pluto, and now Pluto's at a 4. How did I get up there so fast? Ew. I feel like I'm usually pretty good about watching that stuff, but I'm kind of curious what that means, because I don't think we have seen Pluto this high in degrees thus far, if I remember correctly. Okay, so we're going to look at Pluto 4, which is really Pluto 5, or Aquarius 5. I just want to see what that Sabian symbol is. A council of ancestors standing on principle. The symbol speaks to values and ideas that survive from generation to generation. The image of a council of ancestors symbolizes inspiration, guidance from the past, and the implication here is that background guides and influences men's choices. On a practical level, this degree alludes to overshadowing bias, persuasion, and advice. At its highest, it represents a strong sense of tradition, historical perspective, and firm convictions. Watch for inflexibility, resistance to change, or a tendency to live in the past. Interesting. The accent is on tradition that have proven their value. You could find answers you're looking for from older members of your family or community. Your greatest advantage lies in staying with those practices or rituals that have survived many generations, followed precedent. Guard against thinking that everything modern is necessarily better because it's newer. Don't be too quick to try to change what's already working or try to fix what's not broken. Stepping stones are advertisement, counseling, inspiration, wisdom, guidance, instruction, experience, training, direction, recommendations, background, roots, and historical perspective. Well, Sunday is going to be an interesting morning because with that moon coming into conjunction with Pluto, now Pluto's at that degree. Fours deal with emotions, tears, feelings, bodies of water, anything that deals with obviously groups. I mean, Aquarius could mean what's going on with, politics, Congress, Senate, things like that, and like meltdowns that could potentially be happening. And now we're in a dark moon. So we're coming into the moon preparing to hit that 28, almost 29 degree Aquarius eclipse. So the first planet it's got to hit is Pluto. Now, as it's hitting Pluto early in the morning, it's also sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So there could be some real damning things that are kind of being released or that are coming out that people are waking up to, Saturn and Neptune, and being like, what? Because Aquarius is connected, that Mars to these two transits. This is connected to Uranus, which it has been obviously opposing earlier in the week, and now it's starting to come into a square under the solar eclipse. So what do I make of Sunday? I mean, it's a moody morning. I think with the sun in Aquarius also now starting to come into a square with Uranus and Taurus, that's another one of these curveballs, similar to when we saw Mercury square, Venus square. And we've seen the last 2 weeks, major shakeups and shakeouts going on in the financial world and the crypto world and stuff. And I've been saying this for a year now that I'm like, yeah, they're trying to save the bond market. They're trying to kind of crash the dollar. They're trying to change things so that way they can devalue the dollar to make it cheaper or easier to do business, at least here in the United States. And so you're going to see a lot of market volatility with us, and things shake out as we're going into a new moon. And in particular, solar eclipses or the North Node Aquarius has been pretty commonly like the bottom of the markets. So the next month or two is going to be interesting to watch. I think that with that Sun in Aquarius, square Uranus and Taurus, the dark moon phase, I mean, we're preparing for this incoming solar eclipse that's happening next week. So there's a lot of transformative insight. There can be emotional meltdowns. There can be some friend drama, some social drama here. Lots of exposés on the internet for sure. But really powerful connections that are kind of blending with that dreamy structure because it's sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So, revelations amid some of the sudden shifts, I think, is one of the themes. To navigate Sunday, I think it's going to be about surrendering to change. That's what I think. I think it's also meditating on empowerment rather than on stirring the pot and there being some drama. Using that dark moon to release and reset before the eclipse, because we don't want to do any intention setting or rituals on the eclipse because it's a wild energy, and this one in particular, because it's squaring Uranus, really means that it's very destabilizing. But if your intentions are, I want to detox, I want to cord cut, I want to clear things out, I want to let things go, I want to release pain, trauma, fear, this is the day that you actually want to do that. You want to set that intentions on Sunday the 15th. So if we go throughout the day, the moon-Pluto conjunctions, pretty much first thing in the morning, like right around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning Central Time. And then the sun throughout the day is going to get closer to the square with Uranus, which is not going to be actually happening until what appears to be the late evening hours in the 15th, overnight to the 16th. And we don't see really any other aspects that are kind of taking place. Mercury is starting to come into a trine with Jupiter, but you're not really going to start to see that until Monday. So communication aspects are actually getting better. So that's a brief window with Mercury trine Jupiter for good news, communication, like contractual things. Even though it's in shadow, you're going to see better communication that's going to be taking place on Monday. Everything's feeling like it's getting washed out this week. That's kind of how I see it. So next week we have a lot to talk about, right? The Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We're going to talk about the solar eclipse. There's already a video out on that if you haven't already seen it. Some of the things that I already started predicting are already happening, which is kind of wild. So let me know what you guys think with some of those videos. Let's take you through the 12 rising signs. Let's talk about where this Saturn ingress is going to be taking place. I'm focusing more on that because I've done a lot with the Saturn-Neptune stuff, and I need to be able to talk about that with you guys next week. But let's move this back and let's go and look at when Saturn goes into Aries. So as a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology that I like to practice. I do use the whole rising sign system. So that's what I'm going to be showing you guys, especially because Saturn's going to be entering 0 degrees. So anybody can listen to the rising sign to see which house Saturn is going into, what's going to manifest as, what to expect. I'm going to talk about the houses that Saturn rules and then some of the themes that you're going to be seeing over the next couple of months. And then the other thing is you also want to keep in the back of your mind that Saturn is very much tied to Mars. So whatever house Mars is in is also playing a role in this, and it's kind of stirring the pot or kicking up some action to kind of get the show on the road. All right. If you're a Placidus user, just listen to wherever you have 0 degrees of Aries. You might have to listen to a different rising sign. And you can listen to your rising sign, which I recommend to get the most accurate predictions. Then listen to your sun and your moon sign. The moon's going to tell you what you need emotionally. The sun's going to be more about your creativity, your vitality. And the ascendant is what's most likely to happen. All right, well, one of the main players in this transit is definitely going to be my Aries and my Aries risings. What's up, Aries? How are you guys doing? Are you ready for it? You got like a brief break and now Saturn is back and hopefully you're better prepared. I hope you guys have a helmet. Saturn's going to be entering back into your sign. So you have anything that's 0 to 5 degrees, you're under a Saturn and a Neptune transit. If you have anything 0 to about 15 degrees, you're going to be under a Saturn transit all year. Sun, moon, rising, it doesn't matter. You're going to feel the effects of Saturn. It's moving through your first house, which is basically yourself and your identity. It's your body, right? And it's tying your 10th house ruler and also your 11th house ruler to some of these transits. So it basically means that it's building off of your career, your authority, your independence. It's also directly connected to your networks, your friends, and your goals. So as Saturn comes into Aries, really what it's doing is it's rebuilding your personal brand, right? And it's doing it with discipline. I would expect tests in how you present yourself to the world. I think this is also leading to better confidence, better boundaries, more maturity. I do predict for you guys that there can be career advancements. However, it's going to have to be something that you build, that you're doing on your own. Friendships may require boundaries. You also have to be aware of self-sabotaging kind of tendencies and behaviors as well. Keep an eye on your health and also your intuition, because likely it's going to be very strong if you can channel it appropriately. I would also say for you guys that it's time to prioritize self-care and self-care routines and avoid impulsiveness. Be mindful of having a morning routine. Be mindful of being on time. You know, this is a time to really hold yourself, I think, to a very high standard. And obviously you're the trailblazer, of like the Zodiac. So I think that everybody's going to be looking to you to see how you're going to be kind of navigating this. There is new karma coming in with Saturn moving into your sign. So it's about facing where you took shortcuts in the past and maybe you didn't step up to the plate. Maybe you weren't assertive enough. And now you get to earn your leadership. Now you get to get that recognition, but you have to be a leader in the process. I think that this is really helping you build unbreakable strength and owning your power. Maybe last year you weren't ready, but maybe you're more so ready and more so capable now, and you're feeling like it's all or nothing. So let me know what happens, Aries. It's going to be exciting to watch you guys go through this transit. For my Taurus and Taurus risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Saturn going back into the sign of Aries in your natal 12th house. Well, Taurus, life has been really loud recently, huh? I definitely feel like for the most part, Saturn's not really bothering you guys. It is 12 signs away from you. So it's kind of behind either your sun, your moon, or your rising. But specifically for my Taurus rising, Saturn's moving into the 12th house. Now, Saturn is traditionally associated with your 9th house, which can deal more with your belief systems and travel or education. And it's also connected to your 10th house, which is more about your career and your reputation and your professional standings or your status out in the world, even if you're not working. So as Saturn moves into your 12th house, really it's about this inner healing that's kind of going on. And it's about developing spiritual discipline. It's important to release hidden fears for long-term growth to really kind of fully blossom and bloom. Many of you guys would benefit from having a meditation routine, from working with infrared, with saunas, you know, with getting better rest, having time to be alone to reflect, working out in private. These are all things I would recommend. I also think a lot of this is about feeling like you could do a lot of work behind the scenes and not be front and center for stuff as much anymore. Now, what you're going to find is that this is about, I think, really releasing some of these hidden fears so you can bring forth long-term growth, so you can feel a little bit better rested. And I am predicting that there's going to be philosophical shifts for you guys, professional solitude, which will kind of lead to breakthroughs. Maybe it means that you're meditating daily. Maybe it means that you're going back to temple, you're going to church, you know, you're seeking therapy. That stuff can all be beneficial. But the new karma that's coming in for my Taurus risings is like unresolved isolation from past lives now begin to integrate at this time. So you'll be really seeking kind of quietness and alone time. It's about your resilience kind of shining like in those quiet moments. So trust the process. I think that you guys will emerge renewed when Saturn moves into your sign. And I can just think about when Saturn, I mean, just to give you feedback, when I had Saturn that was going through my 12th house, it was a time I got deeply, deeply involved in studying esoteric, you know, learning to read tarot cards, learning to practice astrology, and it became like my religion, but it was something I was doing very privately. I wasn't very open about it. So I wonder if some of the things that you're kind of studying or you're learning or you're working on might somehow influence your career in some way. Good luck, Taurus. What's up, Gemini and Gemini rising? How you guys doing? Saturn should be pretty friendly for you guys, especially because it's going to play nicely with Uranus kind of going into your sign here in just a couple months. It is returning back to Aries. It's going to move through your natal 11th house, which obviously is a house that Saturn is familiar with because of its association with Aquarius through the 11th house in modern astrology, in traditional astrology. So when you see Saturn going back into your 11th house, one thing to think about is that air and fire fuel each other. So Saturn can actually be a bit of a friend, literally, Saturn in the 11th. Your Saturn transit is connected to your 8th house, which is more about intimacy, joint finances, vulnerability, and your 9th house, which is about your beliefs, education, travel, or your philosophy about life. So as Saturn goes into your 11th house, it means that it's helping you now structure new networks, right? New goals. It's also about weeding out the unreliable friends for more solid commitments. Now, I predict for you guys that there's going to be shared resources that can stabilize. There can be higher learning that can kind of deepen or develop, traveling with friends, joining education groups. And this is a wonderful time to commit to community causes and like being a leader or starting a group or starting an association. It's also a good time to set long-term visions because Saturn wants to do that here. I think for my Gemini risings, part of the karma is that the darker side of the Saturn-Neptune transit is you're going to realize there are certain friends that are just not on your team. There are certain people at work that you really don't share the same vision. It can mean that there are group betrayals that are taking place or have taken place, and now you're focusing on building more trustworthy kind of circles and having like a tight-knit group of people around you. If you're feeling a little limited in the friendship department, it's about putting yourself out there and connecting with new people. I do think that your ideas can really inspire people this year because you're going to see Uranus going into your sign and it's going to start trining Pluto in your 9th and sextiling Saturn and Neptune in your 11th. So I would be really open to sharing your beliefs and your ideas with people. I think that you're going to really start to see your dream community start to kind of solidify. And that can be as simple as, you know, a regular online meeting that you have once a month or a community meeting that you're kind of initiating or starting. And really feeling like you've got a core group of friends that are behind you that are supporting the person who you're becoming. I hope it's a good one for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy that transit. All right, Cancer and Cancer risings, you guys ready? Saturn is now returning back into Aries, and if you happen to be 0 to about like 15, 16 degrees, you're going to be under a Saturn square this year, Cancer. If you're under 0 to 5 degrees, you're going to be under a Saturn and a Neptune square, so pace yourself because it's going to take a little time to kind of work through some of those squares where things can feel a little confusing and that there are some starts and stops that are kind of happening this spring. Now, Cancer, Saturn traditionally rules your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, clients, your marketplace, and marriage. as well as your 8th house of intimacy, joint finances, other people's money, and secret kind of karmic entanglement. So what you're going to see is that Saturn is moving into your 10th house. And this is actually a place that Saturn does well. So even though Saturn's like a bit of in a funk in Aries, it likes to be in the 10th house. And for many of you guys, regardless of your age, this is going to be a pretty big period the next 2 years or so when it comes to your status, your career, your professional life, your reputation, even your relationships. It's all going to be kind of like out in the open, front and center. Now, the theme of Saturn going into your 10th house is wanting to build professional maturity. But obviously, some of you guys are going into new businesses, new types of work. Maybe you're becoming an entrepreneur. Maybe you're retiring. And it's really about building authority through effort. So something kind of new is coming in. I think for a lot of you guys, it's like feeling that you want to channel making more money because Mars is kind of moving through the 8th house. I think that's part of it. It can also mean that there is new alliances or professional kind of like alliances that are kind of being built, new relationship statuses also that are potentially happening. So it can feel like a make or break situation for relationships and also for your career here. I do predict that there can be really prominent relationship commitments. I think about the conjunction to Neptune and how it's also highlighting for a lot of you guys that, you're coming out of programs, you're ready to enter into the job field, or you're quitting a job to go back to school, you're working with a mentor, or maybe you're going into teaching or education or something that deals with travel. And I do think there's going to be a lot of financial restructuring through changes that are going to happen with your job. I also think that really the key here is to network strategically and balance your work life, with your relationship lives. And I think the new karma that's kind of coming in is just, if you have avoided authority in the past, right, and not being a leader or not stepping up or not taking charge, now you're stepping into that leadership. Now you're ready to work. Now you're ready to put yourself out there and do something completely different. But like I said, because you're going to be dealing with Saturn, and for some of you guys, even Neptune squares, it feels scary to put yourself out there and kind of be, somebody who's a little bit more direct, but now you have to be the captain of your own ship. So you'll find that this is actually a really beautiful transit. I think that's going to be really kind of peppered with even a little bit of confusion, but also feeling more inspired to do something brand new. Good luck, Cancer. All right, Leo and Leo rising, you guys are going to experience Saturn entering back into the sign of Aries in your natal 9th house. In a fellow sister fire sign. So if you're Leo between 0 and 15 degrees, you're going to be receiving some trines throughout this transit with Saturn this year. So it's pretty friendly for you. I do think it's interesting because Saturn does tie to your natal 6th house of health and habits and your 6th and 7th house of relationships and partnerships. Your marketplace, your therapist, an astrologer, a spouse, anything that deals with relationships with people at work may potentially kind of come up. So as Saturn is going back into your 9th house, really what this is going to be materializing for you guys as disciplined exploration, right? Refining your philosophies, travel plans, going to school, teaching, learning, working with a mentor or a guru, maybe publishing, even like legal matters can kind of come up with Saturn moving into the 9th house. I do think you'll find that daily habits improve. Your schedule can improve. It can also be the time of when you're meant to go to school, you're meant to travel, you're meant to start writing a book, or like there is some person who comes in that's going to be like a way shower for you. And I do think that you'll also find that, relationships will evolve. And Mars being the kind of connection here in your 7th house is telling me that, relationships have to kind of now speed up and take some kind of necessary action. So I've seen some Leo and Leo risings that are like, yeah, I'm just got engaged. We're planning on getting married, right? 9th house can be ceremonies. It could also mean, actually, this isn't working. We're breaking up. So I'm going on a vacation, or I'm talking to an attorney because we're divorcing. So it really depends on your chart. But I would be encouraging you guys to be studying consistently, to be traveling, right? To be shifting your philosophy, to be, kind of questioning assumptions. The new karma that's coming in for you guys is about this unexplored wisdom that, from before, maybe you weren't willing to kind of leave a relationship or to travel on your own or explore things or kind of study. Now you're seeking the truth and you're willing to kind of do it your own way. So I think that you guys are going to like this because it's going to be pretty friendly for you. And you'll especially see later this year, when Jupiter goes into Leo, it's really harmonizing with this, that you're going to have just a lot of life-changing experiences through travel or education. And it'll help you really navigate some of the turbulence that you can be seeing that's kind of happening in relationships if you happen to be partnered. So embrace the growth and enjoy the trip. All right, we've got Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Saturn moving into the sign of Aries, back in your 8th house. And this is a sign that in conjuncts or quincunxes you, so he kind of rub you the wrong way, especially if you got like anything, I would say 0 to about 16 degrees of Virgo, you know, sun, moon, rising. The positive is that it can be really good for a lot of you guys in a financial sense, okay? So you may not see it yet, but it can be quite positive for you guys because now it's moving into the part of the chart that deals with other people's money. So Saturn enters your 8th house of intimacy, transformation, death, rebirth. It's also directly connected to your 6th house of health, habits, and coworkers or pets, and also your 5th house of children, romance, creativity, and self-expression. So having Saturn going into your 8th house is basically going to be really highlighting this theme of deep commitment, right? And it can be deep commitment to yourself, Aries. It can be to your investments. It could be to your intimate relationships. It can be shared resources, maybe healing vulnerability. It can also be topics of inheritances, taxes, dealing with insurance, psychological transformation. And so where physical fitness and having a schedule can be really good for you emotionally, where you're learning to kind of incorporate, you know, transformations and changes to how you're dating or your creative kind of self-expression or even your hobbies. So I feel that for a lot of you guys, there can be good money shifts and how money can come in, but it's coming from other people and it may potentially be owed to you in some way. This is also, I think, where creative blocks begin to lift and health, regimens really start to kind of pay off. My advice to you guys would be to budget wisely. You know, be mindful that the 8th house does deal with debt. It does deal with money owed. It is also about borrowing or lending. And this is also potentially for some people that they're opting to either transform their health, through fitness and how it benefits their psychological health. For other people, the 8th house transits can be about dealing with grief, dealing with loss, dealing with mourning. It can be very much connected to psychological and kind of like working with emotional health, practitioners or therapists, which can be really beneficial if that's something you're considering. And I say that also, Virgo, because I'm looking at, Mars being in the 6th house. So there could be a lot of work stress. There could also be some accidents or injuries that are prompting you to kind of reflect a little bit more on what you need to heal. And this incoming, eclipse that's coming into your sign, retrogrades in your 7th house. I could see a lot of you guys that are just wanting to get some insight about how you can kind of better your mind, your body, and your spirit over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. All right, for my Libras and my Libra risings, I think that this is going to be an interesting one for you guys because obviously you're going to be seeing that Saturn is going to be moving into your opposite sign. And I've been thinking about this a lot because Saturn actually really likes being in the 7th house because it is that exaltation of where we see Saturn in Libra in your sign. It's also about diplomacy and kind of balance. So you can see a little bit of sweet and salty with this aspect. If you happen to be anything 0 to 15 degrees of Libra or Libra rising, you're going to see Saturn is going to be opposing you this year. If you're 0 to about 5 degrees of Libra or Libra rising, you're going to see Saturn and Neptune are going to be opposing you this year. So you have to really think about what's happened in 2025. Now, Saturn rules your 4th house of home and family, also your 5th house of creativity, children, hobbies, and self-expression, taking chances. And now it moves into your 7th house, which is an angular house. So Libra, the themes is serious relationships, okay? So serious relationship problems, serious relationship changes, serious people coming in, older people coming in, and obviously setting boundaries when it comes to finding the balance between where you start and other people begin. Easier said than done with Neptune being there, obviously, because it can be kind of confusing, or you can see people who are lacking self-awareness, or they're having addiction issues or emotional issues, or they're kind of withdrawing, they're hiding. And you can also see that connection with Saturn is really kind of highlighting, like, do I feel love? Like, is this happiness? Is this joy? Can I trust them? Can I commit to them? But traditionally, when we see Saturn going to the 7th house, it's kind of starting that 2.5-year period of karmic responsibility and relationships. Certain people are meant to come in, they teach you about relationships, they don't always stay. Other times it can be about a solidifying of existing relationships and like a new phase of relationships that can kind of begin. So it depends. Wholeheartedly, much easier to deal with if you're a single Libra rising than if you're committed, because if you're single, it can actually be highlighting that 5th house rulership where somebody comes in that you're like, oh my God, I'm in love with them. You just have to get through April, deal with some of the Neptune conjunctions and make sure that it's legit. But serious relationships, setting those boundaries for balance. I do predict for a lot of Libra and Libra risings that if you haven't been partnered, suddenly you're going to want to. It could also mean that there is this emphasis on moving and changes in your living situation and relationships. It could also mean that creative joys mature and a huge emphasis on how relationships are going to transform through children or through, kind of creative hobbies together. And this is really about learning to communicate your needs. And part of the 7th house is about being balanced and knowing to be like, okay, I need to hear them out. And then also recognizing and realizing where there can be lack of self-awareness where you have to create that boundary. So really, I think it's about fostering more equality in relationships. And the karma of Saturn going in there means that if there's been codependency, now you're moving away from that. You might notice that partners are going through periods where they kind of want more independence, and you're kind of having to just kind of take note of it and recognize that and find something to do to occupy your time that can be fun, or creative things you can do that can kind of bring you guys back together. Really, I think what this is about is just, building lasting bonds and making sure that you're in relationships that feel clear, they feel secure, and they also feel genuine and loving, that can help you evolve and kind of transform what's been happening with past relationship patterns and also your home life. So some of you guys will move, you'll move to be by water, others will be relocating and then they meet someone. Others will be feeling like changes or dissolving in relationship is going to create some pretty big changes on the home front, okay? Good luck, Libra. For my Scorpio and Scorpio risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Saturn going back into the sign of Aries in your 6th house. And like Virgo, this in conjuncts you, so it rubs you a little bit the wrong way. You don't quite see it as clearly. But it's still in a Mars-based sign, right? So in that sense, Aries is kind of like your sister or your brother, because both of you guys share that same kind of like blood and guts and glory of Mars. But the 6th house is an interesting place. I mean, I think that watching Saturn, go into your 6th house in this last year, I've observed, I have a lot of Scorpio risings in my life and in my comment section, and a lot of you guys have been like, I don't have a schedule, I'm dealing with being sick, I'm having issues with my pets, I lost my job. I've heard a lot of unemployed Scorpio and Scorpio rising, so I understand. But I'll tell you, with Saturn entering into your 6th house now, it's linking your 3rd house of communication, trips, moving, media, siblings, and your 4th house of home, family, and anything that deals with your living situation into your 6th. So it can bring up, I think the positive is structured routines, right? So having Saturn go into, the 10th house for Cancer rising is like suddenly their karma of their work is going to appear. They're going to start doing a new job, or they're going to start working again if they want. Having it go into, the 6th house for you is going to be very much kind of connected to, I need to have a routine, or I need to go to the gym, or, suddenly now I need to be watching what I'm eating, or I'm going to quit drinking, or I'm going to change a habit, which can be really positive because it creates that structured routine. It improves your daily life because you're applying discipline. So the prediction that I have is that, communicating and serving, it can be family, it can be siblings, it can be taking care of pets. It could honestly be the karma of just cooking and cleaning and taking care of things, and that is beneficial for you and it's humbling. It could also mean that your home base solidifies because you start kind of getting your ducks in a row. You start working from home, you start a home business, right? That's another way this can kind of materialize. Mars is your ruler. It's also the dispositor of Saturn. It's in the 4th. So this is about getting your home in order, getting things clean, spring cleaning, and also anything that deals with kind of cleaning up and dealing with family business is really important. I think the karma here is really saying it's time to organize your tasks and prioritize your wellness. So, if you've neglected some of these duties in the past, now it's about mastering that service. So if you're one of those Scorpio or Scorpio risings that lost your job, most likely you weren't enjoying the environment anyway. So it's trying to get you to kind of do your due diligence to find something that's going to be a better fit. And if you're a Scorpio or Scorpio rising that's had some health related issues, or there's been some challenges that's been going on maybe with your productivity, now it's time to kind of kick it up a notch and get a little bit more serious. So organize your tasks, prioritize wellness. I think that this is really about tapping into that inner intensity and really using it to fuel being more efficient and really thriving in the details. You've heard me say, in previous videos, I'm a Libra rising, so I'm coming out of having had Saturn and Neptune in my sixth house for the last few years. The Neptune transit, got me into doing what I'm doing professionally, and then the Saturn transit the last 2.5 years completely changed my life. From how I'm working, to how I'm scheduling things, to how I'm eating, to my fitness. everything is a result of Saturn and Neptune. So I went into that transit knowing that it was going to wholeheartedly kick my ass in the best ways. So I promise you, if you show up for the next couple of months, you're really going to see that you're building the foundation of not only what's going to be better health and productivity, but some pretty amazing career glow ups that you're going to see over the summer. Okay? Good luck, my Scorpios. All right, Sag and Sag rising. Yes, it's finally out of Pisces. How excited are you? Saturn is left your 4th house. It is now into the sign of Aries. So it's sitting in your natal 5th if you're a, Sagittarius or Sag rising. If you happen to be 0 to about, I would say 15, 16 degrees of Sag, Saturn will actually be trining you this year. And if you're the first 5 degrees, Neptune will as well. So this is friendly. I think for my Sag risings, this is an interesting kind of turning point because there's been a lot of wrapping up. There's been a lot of heaviness, feeling kind of stuck at home. And now things are starting to kind of really evolve. You don't see it yet. You're going to see it post eclipses in February and March. And then by the time the Mercury retrograde's over, you're going to have a lot more time for fun and playtime. But obviously Saturn entering into your 5th house is picking up the energy of your 2nd, which deals with your money and your resources, and your 3rd, which is communication, ideas, short distance traveling and learning, and it moves into your 5th house. So really what this means is that now it's time to get serious about having fun. Now it's time to get serious about playtime. Now it's time to bring some of your creative ideas and make them real. Playing an instrument, taking up a new hobby, having children, anything that's about taking dating more seriously and kind of channeling that kind of inner romantic or channeling that inner artist or working with the inner child is really important because this is about building joy with effort. Now, I predict for a lot of you guys that this is also about financial security. And I think a lot of Sag and Sag risings are either going to start learning about investments or they're going to start becoming a lot more cautious when it comes to their spending. And whether that's in trading, if that's in going to bars or restaurants, if you're really focusing more on your attention and your energy on kids or potentially on your own business, it would make sense. And like you have to kind of structure that and make sure that you're having fun with it. And you can also find that your communication can sharpen, or there can be a huge emphasis in what you're creating or how you're talking to children or how you're traveling or kind of connecting with children. And I would say a tip here would be like, if you have something that you love, it doesn't matter if it's a relationship, if it's a hobby, if it is a artistic kind of form of expression, you have to commit to it. And be more selective when it comes to dating. Be more cautious when it comes to who you're kind of taking up with, because younger people can come in, but it can mean that you're really trying to get more clarity about what that person wants or what they're like. And it could be younger people, especially in the 5th. Now, Mars is kind of connected to this and it's in the 3rd. So it might mean you're online dating. It might mean you're traveling with your kids. It might mean you're having conversations about what you're looking for in relationships. It might mean that you're traveling to visit, family. That could be another way of looking at it. But I think that you're not being as frivolous with your spending. That's what I think. And you're learning to have fun in ways that are more conservative, and you're creating things that are more meaningful, but it's less about materialism. So I do think that your optimism kind of helps some of these aspects that you're going to see with the trine. I would channel that into things that are creative. So if you've wanted to take an art class, if you wanted to learn, how to play an instrument, if there's something that you've always wanted to kind of do, take the class, learn how to do it, take the short distance trip, communicate with those who you love, and kind of speak your mind. Good luck. I hope you guys enjoy that transit. A lot friendlier than what you've had in recent years. All right, Capricorn. It is on. We have got Saturn that is moving back into Aries in your natal 4th house. And as you know, Saturn is your chart ruler. So wherever Saturn goes is where you are. Really reflect on what happened last year, because Saturn moved into obviously Aries briefly with Neptune, and then they retrograded back out. So that's going to give you a little bit of a piece of the puzzle. Now, Saturn rules you. Saturn also rules your money, your resources, and your financial stability, right? 2nd house Aquarius. So as it moves into your 2nd house, what's interesting is that that's tying your 1st and your 2nd house to what's happening in your 4th. 4th house, family foundations. Right? I always tell clients, especially if they have Saturn in the 4th or they're going through a Saturn in the 4th transit, I'm like, here's the deal. This is the foundation of where your life is going to be built. Okay. And when you're at the bottom, there's nowhere to go up but here. So things can feel rather low over the next couple of months. You can feel kind of homebound, or you're dealing with a living situation or a move that's taking forever, or you're trying to move to another country, or you're, renovating a house, you're looking for a new place to move, dealing with family stuff, all that. But it looks up. So it's kind of talking about where it wants to kind of go. And so this period that you're going to be in the next couple of years, you're building that foundation. You don't want to build that foundation with like sand and popsicle sticks because it's not going to be stable. You want cement, you want to take your time, you want to make sure you're getting rooted somewhere. And it's also about emotions. And so a lot of this is about building emotional security. And so you'll find over the next 2 or 3 weeks that's a huge emphasis. And maybe you're moving to a new place, maybe you're breaking away from family. It could also mean that you're trying to instill having your own space, your own home away from other people or your own traditions. Now, I predict that this is also about self-reinvention, but more from the inside out. And there's this shift that's going on and kind of getting into alignment with what you value. Well, Mars is the dispositor, it's in the second, so money being spent on home, buying homes, selling property, selling land, maybe investing more money into your family. Those things can kind of come up. And you may see home improvements. Obviously, you know, another thing with Saturn and Neptune being there is changes in how you're communicating with neighbors or how you're communicating with family. And the new karma that's coming in is just, you know, if there has been this unwillingness to deal with family karma or emotional burdens, now they're coming back up so you can kind of heal some of like the family lineage. I think a lot of this is going to be very interesting for you guys. You know, I have Saturn and Neptune in my 4th house, and natally they're conjunct. And I had everything that happened textbook for my Saturn return. You know, my house flooded, older relatives passed. My house was super haunted at one point. I think that was Neptune, but Pluto was there too. I also found that there was just a bunch of things that came out about my family that I did not know, about my roots, my heritage, and my dad's side of the family, and finding that there was other people in the family that were generations back that I never met that practiced astrology, which I thought was really interesting. And there was like this mystical kind of side to things. But also there is this longing to find home. And so something that you guys probably really want to do is you have to recognize and realize it's within you, right, Aries? It's not necessarily a physical place. So if you find yourself wandering and kind of roaming, realize that you're looking more for the feeling, not necessarily a specific location. I think your strength is patience, and so this can kind of anchor you in a way. But once again, if you are about 0 to 15 degrees of Capricorn and Cap rising, Saturn is going to be squaring you. The positive is that Capricorn is kind of the superior of the square. So your persistence, your patience, your unwillingness to do anything flighty or too quick or commit too quickly is good. And I think you guys are going to see that you're really kind of getting rooted in this next year and getting really situated. So definitely invest in things that are going to bring you security and feel like home. Good luck. For my Aquarius and Aquarius risings, you guys are not going to pass. I feel like Gandalf. Thou shalt not pass. You're still, as if the Pluto transits weren't enough, you're still feeling the effects of Saturn because now your traditional ruler is changing signs. It's going back into Aries. But the positive is that you're going to see Saturn and Neptune really harmonizing with Pluto in your sign this year, harmonizing with Uranus, your modern day ruler, especially in the spring. And like, that's really going to light your chart up like a Christmas tree, like in all the best ways. So it may feel like a bit of intense pressure now, but you're going to really start to see things kind of rock and roll as you're getting into the summertime. Now, Saturn is entering your 3rd house of communication, learning, your neighborhood, your vehicles, your siblings, your mind. And it's linking the 12th house ruler of Capricorn, which is more about your subconscious and I think overworking or self-undoing or things where you can be a little too rigid. And also your ascendant ruler to your 3rd. This has been interesting to kind of watch Aquarius risings because a lot of it's like about structuring your subconscious thoughts. Like I have found a lot of my Aquarius risings are writing right now. And I think maybe that's the Saturn transit in the 3rd. And they're trying to like write about historical things or ancestral things, or they're kind of up all night writing, or they're doing research, or they're studying, or they're learning. I've seen others that are focusing on learning new languages with Saturn coming into the 3rd house. I've seen others that have been really focused on trying to move or kind of like relocate. Yes, you can see some issues that can happen with vehicles and with siblings for sure. But I think that this is more just about refining your ideas and finding ways to just get the words out there and inspire other people. And like, this is about ideas with discipline. So really the prediction here is that there can be a lot of inner peace and there can also be identity issues that are kind of like solidified. My recommendation would be focus on your study habits, be mindful of your speech, do not let your subconscious run away with itself and like let fear kind of steer how you're communicating or thinking. Be mindful of your driving, be mindful of sometimes hidden frustration because of that connection with the 12th house that can kind of come out in your words. And there can be scattered kind of minds that have happened in the past, you know, with Saturn being there last year. Now it's kind of transforming into more focused wisdom and like being able to share wisdom with other people. So, you know, just giving some reflection. I've seen people go through this transit where they start a podcast, they start a YouTube channel, they start writing a book, they start teaching series, that kind of stuff, which could be really positive for you. And the way that you're communicating and connecting is different. Obviously, you've got innovation on your side with your chart ruler that's being kind of activated, and also Pluto and Uranus. So I think now you're learning to kind of speak with purpose, and you're trying to figure out just what exactly it is that you have to say. And that might mean you have to study, you might have to learn a new language, you might have to kind of travel a little bit, but I think it's going to be great if you get into the habit of meditating, journaling, reflecting, so that way you can really find the proper words. Good luck, Aquarius. And for my Pisces and my Pisces risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Saturn going into the sign of Aries, back in your natal second house. And I would just highlight for you guys that this is important for you guys as well, because even though Saturn is leaving your sign, Neptune is leaving your sign, Saturn's going to conjunct Neptune. Neptune is your modern day ruler. I'll be doing another video on that soon. There's some stuff on the channel already, but Saturn rules your 11th house of goals, friends, and allies, networks, wishes, hopes, and dreams, and your 12th house of foreign lands, hidden places, subconscious, spirituality, self-undoing, and it moves to the second. What I have found for my Pisces risings is that it's manifesting as getting serious about making money, being self-sufficient, being an entrepreneur, doing it yourself, having that sense of feeling satisfied and proud of yourself because you can, kind of take care of yourself. And I think that's the positive side of the Saturn transit, building your worth through effort. However, it is also, I've never seen a Saturn transit in the second house that doesn't come with tightening the purse strings, okay? Especially with Neptune being there. So there can be like this sense of really kind of Marie Kondoing your life and being like, what do I need? Is less more, and becoming more of like a minimalist and like having less things, more experiences. Especially when it comes to spending more time or energy with your friends, or having the time to travel or to rest. It can also start to show you where there's been some like holes in the bucket, like budget speaking, where you're just like, you know, streaming networks and ordering food and things that you're doing because it's casual and it's easy and it's convenient and you're doing it with friends and it just makes sense. And now you're going to start looking at things being like, yeah, no, I'm working hard for my money. I want to be like more conservative with it. So you'll see a lot of financial maturity that comes through. I think it's also, like I said, building worth through effort. And you'll find that, you know, there's group goals or collaborations with groups. There can be a lot of spiritual depth to how you're making money, or your beliefs, or your philosophy about money now. I would advise you guys to budget a little bit more strictly and value yourself. I would also say Saturn, you know, going into the second house with Mars being the dispositor in the 12th, and an eclipse going through there might mean that, you know, there's some unexpected expenses coming. There's some unexpected travel coming. There's going to be a period of taking time off or kind of stepping away. And so you have to either prepare for that, or you need to be having like a rainy day fund. I would also say value yourself. That's going to be really important, knowing your worth. And obviously, being detached from material things is so important. Now you want to ground your abundance. You'll find that your financial dreams will manifest if you're valuing yourself. And it's only then that you start to see some of the abundance that begins to kind of flow. Okay. All right, guys. Well, Godspeed this week. It'll take some time for it to kind of unfold. We'll see even more of it next week as we're getting into the eclipses. But as always, thank you guys so much for joining me on my Sunday's Astro Weather for the week. Remember that Saturn shift is really the invitation to kind of build with intention and also with a little bit of heart. Obviously, if you guys resonated with this video, please do hit the like button, give me a thumbs up. Sharing is caring. Share this on your socials and make sure that you are subscribed. Click that bell button below. Leave me your comments, leave me your rising signs. Let me know what happened last time Saturn went into Aries. What are you feeling now? I am ready for it. I'm 0 degree Libra rising, so I've already started seeing how it's kind of manifesting in my life, and I'm just kind of like, all right, let's see how it goes. I know it's going to be a wild ride. So yeah, leave me your comments, your feedback. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for support. Any interaction with the channel really helps the channel grow. And obviously stay tuned for some of the other videos like Venus that's going to be entering into Pisces, and some other goodies that we're going to be kind of putting out here this week. I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I'll catch you guys back here on Tuesday Until next time, take care.